Yemeni people inside and in diaspora commemorate end of British rule today. Local people jubilate liberation from Houthi rebel control in Hodeidah. Houthi mine injures 7 innocent civilian people in Hodeidah. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Rana Swaylam. Yemeni people celebrate today, the 30th of November, the end of the British rule that remained on the southern part of the country for more than a century. More details on this are within this report.
Colonization of the southwestern half of modern-day Yemen by Britain began in 1863, and British rule lasted about 100 years. But the northeastern half of Yemen never was under British rule. In 1963, independence leaders of South Yemen met in Geneva, Switzerland, to discuss terms with the UK. By 30th of November 1967, South Yemen had been peacefully transferred to fully independent status. However, this only happened after a bloody revolt against British rule that had spanned across the previous years. British influence increased in the southern and eastern portion of Yemen after the British captured the port of Aden in 1839. It was ruled as part of British India until 1937, when Aden became a crown colony and the remaining territory was designated a protectorate. The last British troops were removed on November 29th. On November 30th, 1967, the People's Republic of Yemen, comprising Aden and South Arabia, was proclaimed. The country's name changed to the People's Democratic Republic of Yemen on December 1st, 1970. In May 1988, the governments of the Yemen Arab Republic and the South agreed to withdraw troops from their mutual border, create a demilitarized zone, and allow easier border crossing for citizens of both states. In May 1990, they agreed on a draft unity constitution, which was ultimately approved by referendum in May 1991. The Republic of Yemen was officially declared on May 22, 1990, and President Ali Abdullah Saleh became the president of the new republic. Today, Independence Day is a time for all Yemeni people to celebrate the modern birth of their nation.
Joint forces made important progress on the borders between Hais and Al-Jarrahi in Hodeidah. The joint forces reported that they shelled artillery fires on Houthi militia in Hais, causing losses on them. In the same context, the joint forces shot down a Houthi drone in the same area. After liberating more land south of Hodeidah, the joint forces began an operation to repair a number of bridges that were destroyed by Houthi rebels. Media sources affiliated to the joint forces reported that teams started to repair the bridge linking the city of Hais with Al-Jarrahi after it was destroyed by the militias, which hampered traffic. People in Hais city expressed their happiness after being liberated by the joint forces from the Houthi rebels. According to them, they were brought back to life again, adding that roads and communication to Hais were back to normal. More on this story is in the following report.
Overwhelming joys fell on the hearts of the people in the countryside of Hais, south of Hodeidah, after the joint forces liberated their village from the Houthi militia within less than 24 hours. People could enjoy the return of security and public life to normal.
We are completely blessed with the freedom. Siblings can call each other and reach their families in area under the control of the Houthi militia. Thanks to the strong heroes in the front lines who were able to force the Houthis out of Hais.
They finally breathed hope and expressed their joy at the liberation of the Directorate and its complete security. People met their families and friends again after more than 4 years of Houthi forces division. The rebels restricted their freedom, confiscated their ideas, and forced people to submit to their activities.
They forced us to attend their demonstrations, marches, and to some places they were tarnishing the image of the coalition.
Unforgettable moment to the people in Hais after the revelation from the Houthi militia. Routes were reopened for people after the Houthi militia cut off them and planted mines alongside them. They obliged people to travel long distances that took hours and large sums of money. This cut-off prevented citizens from reaching the center of the city of Hais, where they could find enjoyment.
Thanks God, I thank the joint forces backed by the coalition to liberate the villages of Hais in 24 hours. It was a nightmare. We took a long time to get to Hais city. It was a nightmare and we breathe again. We met our brothers and friends. The city in which we were raised up, they forced us out of it.
A real battle waged by the joint forces to correct the national path in Yemen, which began early this month by repositioning in Hodeidah. This repositioning is considered to be a new phase to liberate Yemen from the oppression of the Houthi militia.
Still in Hais, 7 people were injured in a mine explosion. Local sources said that the mine exploded in a car that was carrying an entire family, injuring 2 women and 4 children. The 4 children were given first aid in Hais, while the 2 women were transferred to Makha as they were in critical conditions. Houthi deadly mines continue to claim lives of innocent civilians in the west coast. Not a single day passes without an incident of mine explosion is being documented. Although Masan project has made considerable efforts in clearing out mines, people still fall victims of them. The following report has more on this.
Over the course of 3 years, more than 20 foreign mine clearance experts tasked with demining Houthi mines have lost their lives. The number of casualties was released amid figures that presented the scope of the project carried out in Yemen as part of the Saudi Project for Landmine Clearance, MASAM. According to MASAM's director, the project's field crew has removed 263,797 landmines, unexploded artillery shells, and other lethal explosive devices. Bomb squads dealt with 169,792 unexploded ordnances, 83,943 anti-tank mines, and 3,984 anti-personnel mines, spanning 25 million square meters of Yemeni territory since the program's inception until July 23rd of this year. As for the Yemeni government, the Iran-backed Houthis have laid over 1 million landmines throughout the country since the conflict began 6 years ago, making it the most mined country since World War II. In March, the Yemeni Observatory on Landmines published statistics that showed that devices planted by Houthis in Taiz alone had killed and injured 3,263 civilians. Data from the Yemeni Coalition to Monitor Human Rights Violations showed 1,929 civilians, including 357 children and 146 women, have been killed in the past 6 years, and 2,242 civilians, including 519 children and 167 women, have been left disabled due to Houthi landmines. Houthi deadly mines seem to continue to claim innocent lives, with no real pressure applied from the international community.
Yemeni officials said 14,000 people have been displaced from Hodeidah recently. According to officials of IDP camps, 8,000 of those displaced from Stockholm areas have settled in Al-Khoukha district south of Hodeidah. Other 3,000 settled in Al-Makha district of the neighboring Taiz governorate. IDP officials outlined that the total number of displaced people during the past 2 months is more than 100,000 people. They added that the displaced fled from several areas in Marib, Hodeidah and Chabwa. The coalition in Yemen said it targeted a training camp for the terrorist Houthi militia south of Ma'rib. The coalition said in a statement that it had launched an airstrike on a training camp for the Houthi militia in Mahaliya district, killing 60 militants. Recently, coalition fighters intensified their air raids on various battlefronts, resulting in the destruction of dozens of military vehicles and the killing of hundreds of Houthi fighters. Government forces captured 8 members of the terrorist Houthi militia after confrontations south of Ma'rib. A military source said Houthi militants were killed and wounded in addition to the destruction of their equipment on a number of fronts in Ma'rib Governorate. Coming next. Humanitarian aid is being weaponized as people cannot have smooth access to it.
اضطرينا نحن نغادر من ذي وزحنا.
الله يستنقذكم يا محوية الله يستنقذ.
Welcome back. The World Food Programme excluded hundreds of cases from food aid in Al Udain west of Ib in the center of Yemen. Citizens accused the United Nations program of working with the Houthi militia despite the deteriorating living and economic conditions. Citizens said that WFP exclusion was based upon the Houthi inclination, adding that the needy and poor were not taken into consideration. In the same context, citizens who received aid complained about looting that took place in their rations. Houthis continue to prevent humanitarian aids from people who need it most. They started using aids to blackmail people by asking them to take their sons as fighters. Also, Houthis are accused of giving such aids to their supporters. The following report has more on this.
Most of Yemen's population of more than 30 million people live in Houthi-controlled areas, where the lion's share of food aid is distributed. Despite supplying amounts of aid each year of the war to these areas, the World Food Programme has constantly raised concerns in internal checks that the food may not be reaching the most food insecure and vulnerable populations due to Houthi blocking. Houthis block humanitarian aid from those who deserve it the most in order to unite control in central and northern Yemen. The UN describes the situation as the world's worst humanitarian crisis and a man-made famine. The conflict has displaced nearly 4 million Yemenis, and about two-thirds of the country's estimated population of more than 30 million are in urgent need of some form of aid. 14 million Yemenis are severely food insecure, and 12 million depend on aid to survive. The humanitarian aid is sold on the black market for the benefit of the Houthi group and its leaders. Yemen's Houthi rebels, according to multiple reports, have essentially weaponized humanitarian aid and prevented its delivery to the people that need it the most in areas under their control. The impact of Houthi authority on humanitarian functions is a result of its control over security clearances and monitoring of operations. Houthi militia have prevented international aid from reaching poor towns in Sana'a because the people in these towns refuse to send their sons to fight along their side in the west coast. According to local sources, a Houthi security checkpoint at Sana'a entrance offered an organization to take half of the aid it's carrying to allow it to pass. Houthis continue to interfere in everything in Yemen. They even block the aid that can be the only way to help Yemenis. When will this end? No one knows.
People in Houthi-controlled areas are suffering a lot, especially with the salaries not paid for more than 5 years. This has made a great deal of them live a terrible life. The following report has more details.
Famine is expanding in the militia's areas of control as it refuses to pay salaries for employees. The war has affected the Yemeni society since Houthi armed groups seized control over Sana'a by armed forces. Varied violations have been committed by the war parties to record Yemen as the worst humanitarian disaster. One of the most striking patterns that impacted the Yemeni society, causing the worst humanitarian crisis, was the interruption of earnings and salaries of government employees. Every single household in Yemen is bearing the repercussions of this interruption. Many employees left their government jobs and switched to the private sector in order to make a living. However, teachers and employees in the education sector were forced to continue working due to the threat of dismissal and replacement. They were hit the hardest by the suspension of salaries, since this sector is not considered as a profit-generating one. Many families could not bear the consequences of the salary cuts. Many households did not survive the stormy tide of need that led them to starvation and famine. Areas experiencing acute food shortages and high levels of malnutrition have been observed in the Houthi-controlled areas in Yemen. According to the World Bank, famine conditions have been observed in 3 Yemeni provinces under the control of the Irani-backed Houthi militia. Famine is scattered across the northern provinces of Hajjah, Amran, and El Jawf. More than 80% of Yemen's population face major challenges in accessing food, drinking water, and healthcare services amid the lack of human resources, equipment, and supplies. Malnutrition rates remain high among women and children, with 1.2 million pregnant or breastfeeding women and 2.3 million children under the age of 5 requiring treatment for acute malnutrition. Employees are left with 2 empty pockets in front of their children, unable to provide basic meals or to provide the value of medical services. They also face the threat of losing their places of residence and families after being unable to pay their rent.
Telecommunications service was almost completely out in large parts of Aden, Al-Dala, Lahj and Abyan. Many customers complained about the weak and disrupted telecommunications service. Since September 2014, these companies are subjected to direct intervention from Houthi rebels who control the Ministry of Telecommunications in Sana'a. The National Committee Against Coronavirus announced 9 new cases of the COVID-19 in 2 governorates and 1 death. With the current updates, the total confirmed cases are 10,004, including 1,950 deaths and 6,887 cases of recovery. Here's a reminder of the main headlines. Yemeni people inside and in diaspora commemorate end of British rule today. Local people jubilate liberation from Houthi rebel control in Hodeidah. Houthi mine injures 7 innocent civilian people in Hodeidah. This is the end of the news. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.